Think your lashes have hit their limit? Discover limitless length and full volume with Maybelline Sky High Mascara. The Flex Tower brush bends to volumize and extend every single lash from root to tip. And the lightweight bamboo-infused formula makes lashes feel weightless. Now in 8 bold shades so you can take your lashes to new heights every day. Visit Maybelline.com to shop Sky High Mascara now.
When the holidays start to feel a bit repetitive, reach for a Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry and put your twist on tradition. A bold cranberry and winter spice flavor fusion, Sprite Winter Spiced Cranberry is a refreshing way to shake things up this sipping season. And only for a limited time. Sprite, obey your thirst.
Welcome to Why We Roll,
a tabletop role-playing game design podcast by the Stillfleet Studio.
We're your hosts, Chris Pickett, creator of the historical fantasy game Dance Macabre,
and Wythe Marshall, creator of the political sci-fi game Stillfleet.
Through the show, we hope to amplify new creative voices.
We chat with different indie TTRPG designers, talking through a range of questions that are pertinent to many designers, players, and GMs.
We hope to showcase fresh and even challenging ideas about what makes imagination-based games so powerful.
Before we introduce today's guest, a reminder. If you enjoy this episode, please consider supporting the show and all of our games over at patreon.com/Stillfleet.
Okay, let's find out why we roll. Hey, what's up, everybody? It is Why We Roll, the tabletop role-playing game chat show from the Stillfleet Studio. As always, I'm Chris Pickett, and I'm joined by my wonderful friend and co-host,
Wythe Marshall.
Yeah, that's Wythe. Today, we are sitting down to chat. I'm very excited. We're sitting down to chat with Moss Powers, the creator of HELLWHALERS, among many other titles, through Brutalist. How are you doing, Moss?
Brewist, but we're
Brewist,
good.
sorry.
No, you're good.
I was thinking of architecture.
Architecture. No, I'm good. It's a little hot here in Portland, but things are good. We just wrapped up a big campaign not long ago, and it's going great.
Sorry we didn't get to talk to you earlier in the summer while the campaign was live, but we're hoping that when this comes out, probably in a couple weeks, maybe you will have either some late pledging going on, or we can always just direct people to pick up HELLWHALERS, which is really good. I did last year, and I was very happy to have I don't buy all the physical books, but very happy to have that one physically in the collection. So I'm very excited to do the same for Book of Leviathan, we'll talk more about that. But thanks for making time, and looking forward to just asking you some questions about your practice.
Yeah, I was going to say, we usually kick things off, Moss, by just kind of asking folks, like, what's your history with tabletop role-playing games? How did you get into the hobby? How did that develop into game design? All that good stuff. But what's your past?
All right, the abbreviated lore. I guess, it all started when I was a young individual. I used to play imagination games on, like, the playground when I was a kid. I remember getting in trouble because we weren't doing enough physical exercise. They made us walk laps instead while we were playing imagination role-playing games before they had structure. Probably when I was, like, in 4th grade or something, or 3rd grade. Used to do that a lot. And then in middle school, discovered D&D 3.5. We kind of played a crude, not exactly by the rules version of it for a long time, as many young folks do. And from there, I took a little hiatus from role-playing games after middle school for quite a while, actually. Most of my high school years, I didn't really do a lot of that. But then I returned kind of when I moved in with a college roommate. I was playing a lot of D&D. We played some Call of Cthulhu for a while. And that kind of reignited that. And from there, I kind of moved over to, I guess we can cut ahead to the pandemic, when I kind of, wasn't sure what to do with myself, but I had been GMing and running all these games for so long. I kind of wondered what it would look like if I were to take that a little bit farther. And I started with a game called Trashtronautica. Trashtronautica was kind of a charity endeavor of sorts. I was using it to help animals, which is another one of my passions. I like animals a lot. but I wanted to make a game to raise money for wildlife. I did that for urban wildlife, and then that kind of led me into game design as it kind of stands right now.
Yeah, that's another great game. I know that one as well. And I honestly, yeah, Brewist has a bunch of cool stuff, and definitely encourage people to check out Trastronautica. It's it's dear to my heart, the animals genre, and obviously as a big sci-fi nerd, I love that it's kind of animals plus sci-fi in a sleek, innovative indie package. So that was a lot of ground, boss. I feel like you jumped from childhood to the pandemic to
right. Yeah.
So yeah, were you the like forever GM, or were you just, were you like didn't identify that way? I mean, I asked because so many people who come on here were like, yeah, I was just GMing a lot, and eventually people were like, you should write this stuff down,
Yeah. I was the forever GM in our groups. I think it's pretty common for a lot of designers to have been in that space at one point. I think a lot of that was more by choice than by necessity a lot of times. I have a lot of fun world building and tinkering with things and putting together stories. I'm also a LARPer in my spare time, and I do a lot of like storytelling in my LARP community. So there's a lot of history of like being really into storytelling and game design and all sorts of things like that.
So that's interesting. Yeah, we've had a couple discussions about LARPing, but not too many. Because I feel like, Chris, you and I like knew that world, but I was not a big participant in it. Not at time in a way now. Like now I think I would, but it feels different enough. Like it's not quite as like built into the indie, like sit down at a table community. So I wonder how that informs game design differently. Maybe one thing is it leads to these, more quickly. My hypothesis is it leads more quickly to narrative structure. So like, what are we actually going to do imagining together? Cause I really like, looking at some Brewist games, that I think are interesting to discuss, like Draken and Knight, the fact that you have like paired like dragon knight solo non-solo game, and then the new one, which I don't know anything about really, I just was like on an itch, Killing Time, where it's like someone is Father Time and someone is the hero who kills time. Like these are like very different from the you could be an elven ranger, you guys are going to go kill goblins and later kill ogres and kill dragons. Like it's a different narrative arc. So it's not totally formulated question. I don't know, Chris, if you have a way to formulate that, but I'm wondering how do you do what you do,
I guess speaking broadly on like the themes and the ways that I get to my game design is like I've always been a fan of kind of bespoke systems for a start. I like a system that kind of does what I want it to do. And I've always been of the school of like figuring shit out myself. So a lot of times when I'm coming through game design, I have like a hands-on learning style. So when I'm trying to figure out how to get better at this craft, a lot of it comes down to just kind of making my way through as best as I think I would do it without too many preconceived notions of like other systems or structures. So a lot of my game design kind of comes in not entirely in a vacuum, because I definitely do like design homework and study of other works, but like I try to approach it from like a somewhat fresh perspective in terms of like mechanics without worrying too much about the trappings of what came before.
Yeah, that makes sense. So less like in the tradition of like, let me remake D&D but better, and more just like having fun imagining things, what would facilitate that, constraints that would be fun. And if it happens to resemble some other things at all, then like that's fine, but yeah, that's not the goal.
Yeah.
I think that's a cool goal that more game designers who do come from a very D&D-ified tradition could maybe consider. Is like, what if you just never play D&D? Like, how would you use dice or cards? Because I noticed there's cards in a lot of your games, and I really like that as well. Cards, tokens. I know Vex, who's in the chat, has introduced me some token mechanics and just kind of underlined them in discussions around game design, and I appreciate that because I think there's a lot to do with these very simple mechanics that just get lost in the maze of different ways of rolling dice, different ways of rolling different polyhedra, which is
right.
But
yeah,
it does make things go a certain direction in terms of how you then write out the rest of the book, basically. So I guess, token mechanics are underrated as hell, says Vex. So I guess to go from there, I mean, maybe, Moss, one way to pick your brain a little about your process is to ask about, when have you hit a point where you feel like, I feel like I'm really, I know what I'm doing more as a game designer and or professionally, like I'm getting more interest. I don't know if that's before HELLWHALERS, which, spoiler, I think we're going to talk a lot about HELLWHALERS, but I don't know if there's if a tipping point or if it's just a slow, like you're just doing, having fun. But I don't know if you can talk a little about the sort of publishing side and that move from GMing and making up games to like, even just on itch, right? Like I'm going to put together a cool PDF that someone else can read who's a stranger and figure out, how to use it.
Right. I think it's kind of a fallacy to conflate like success with being good at a craft. And I think that's something that I'm trying to always keep in mind. So even though my projects have been moderately successful, I don't know that I'm at where I want to be yet with the craft, and I think that those journeys are kind of independent of each other. But speaking broadly, I think in general, having gotten 5 or 6 years into making games, I think I'm a lot further than I used to be, and I'm really proud of where I'm at. But I still have a long way to go in terms of what I want to do with the art form. And like, I consider myself an artist at the end of the day, but like artist for me at the end of the day as well. So it's like, when I do this, it's a self-gratifying process. I do this because it's fun. And the success and stuff, sure, it helps. But like when a game does well, it doesn't necessarily mean it is for the same reasons as a game that doesn't do as well, that might be structured in like a different way that just didn't hit with an audience for whatever reason. So I'm very proud of a few of my games that never really made it very far. And while I'm immensely proud of HELLWHALERS as well, I think that that's, it doesn't necessarily reflect on anything but a confluence of, circumstance.
Yeah, if you had to say like, one or two maybe commercially underappreciated gems that you've done, what's an example of one of your favorites that maybe didn't make it, quite as big as HELLWHALERS, but something that like you yourself really feel connected to?
I have two that are my favorite games that I've done. Killing Time is definitely one of them. It's still not quite finished. I'm in the ashcan phase with it. I still want to touch up a couple things in the general of it, but it's a pretty vulnerable game, and it's not really the kind of game that you're going to sit down and play with your friends on just a random Tuesday afternoon. It's kind of a heavier content, because it's about death and mortality and how I felt about those things, and still feel about those things. But it's kind of heavier than a lot of games really that people look for are going to be. So I think in that sense, I'm really proud of it artistically, but I don't think it's really going to hit a commercial stride at any point, because it's kind of a more vulnerable space for all of that art. And by the opposite coin, I think I have a really fun game that could do well commercially, is lighter-ish, but it's Infinite Reverie, which I think might just be too weird for most audiences. I really had fun with the mechanics on that one, but it's kind of weird. It uses some like interesting math and cards, but it's a fun one. It's JRPG themed, as a lot of games kind of hit for a little bit, and you're playing in like a cyberpunk dystopia, like overthrowing like this corporation that bought out a country through like some shady business deals, basically.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it also sounds very poignant for where we might be moving to globally.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to play that one when you're done with it, whenever, and especially if it has weird mechanics. All the more reason I want to play it. So just throwing it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, so like we said, you've crafted a lot of different games, things like that up to this point. HELLWHALERS has come out. You've got Book of Leviathan, which just ended a successful campaign on BackerKit. Again, congratulations. For those who are listening, for those who don't know, could you just walk us through what is HELLWHALERS? What is HELLWHALERS? Kind of, like, is there like a narrative loop in it? And also, it has unique kind of token mechanics as well, if you want to get into the weeds with that.
Sure. So as a broad overview, HELLWHALERS is a token-based game of nautical whalers, or nautical horror and Christian religious horror. And you play as damned whalers set upon the seas of literal hell, fishing, fighting, facing the trials of hell, and ultimately trying to hunt a monstrous Leviathan whale in a bid for redemption of your immortal soul. So a lot of it is very kind of based in the BOB system, but I kind of did a little modifications on a few things. There is a GM role, which is played by the captain, and the standard token mechanics of a BOB-style game where you would exchange tokens for strong moves and receive tokens for weak moves is kind of added to by a gambling mechanic. So you gamble tokens on a board in a sort of 3d6 roulette game called Sickbo, which is an ancient Chinese gambling game. And you kind of play this game to collect enough souls to pulse the hell whale's heart. Its disembodied heart is owned by your captain, and should you pulse the heart 3 times, you can summon the hell whale, hopefully slay it, consume its flesh, and ascend out of hell. That's the gist of the game.
Just some nice light themes.
Yeah.
And there's some great playbooks with the sort of ideas of who is in hell going after a whale. Like, what is this nautical voyage? Like, where are we? It's really great. It looks great. It reads really effortlessly. And the narrative structure, the kind Chris and I talk about a lot, is it's like tight, but then it opens up into like an infinite gameplay. You can do whatever you want, but you're in a very specific scenario. Yeah, you're in hell. Yeah, why not? So what's behind HELLWHALERS? I must ask this. I must admit I'm a huge fan of Moby Dick, and I've taught it at the college level. And
cool.
In the modern era, it's like, assigning a 900-page book about guys like massaging sperm whale oil together. It's like very. It's both nerdy and boring to most students, but also
it's a hard read.
Yeah, I mean, it gets at these questions of like, what even is, like, what are books? Like, what are we doing here? Because it's written in tons and tons of short chapters, a lot of which are sort of repetitive. I think it's very beautiful and lyrical, and you can kind of sink into it. But it is not that there are not other whale books, but I mean, talk about a guy who nailed a theme. Like,
right.
When you think whale, I think like this one dude really liked whales. So why HELLWHALERS, and how much, are you drawing on any specific, whether it's religious, Dante, other visions of sort of the afterlife and repentance, or whether it's more the nautical journey? Like, yeah, what gave you this idea?
So originally it kind of started out as a visual crossover. I really wanted to do a visual piece, collaborating with one of my friends doing the woodblock, the lino cut stamps. And we were talking about doing that for a game of mine, because I was a game designer, obviously, at the time. And we were kind of talking about some cool stuff. And I was like, what if we had a game that was like kind of Moby Dick-ish and like did something very classical style? Because he's kind of someone that enjoys that kind of stuff too. And then we kind of threw a twist on it at the end. But originally the game was kind of concepted as that. Like, the game was made for the cover almost. Which is kind of an interesting space to be in with that. But like, we wanted to do a crossover with that. And then I was like, what do I do with this? And it started out kind of looking at a conversation between, I think it was Jay Dragon and Andy from Pandian Games, having a conversation about what you can do with tokens besides just exchange them one for one in moves. And Jay had said something about positioning of tokens is something that people can explore more. And I kind of took that in a direction of like, well, I had known Sickbo through LARP, and I was like, what if we took tokens and we kind of put them on this gambling game that I was already familiar with, because we do it a lot in our LARP casinos with fake currencies and stuff. But what if we kind of took those tokens and put them in a space where we're tracking where they are and then using them in that gambling game? And then the themes of like the whale were already kind of present in the cover, because we were talking about Moby Dick with my friend. So it kind of came together marrying those two like separate ideas of like the visual and the mechanics. But at the end of the day, it was kind of grew into its own project. And I decided once it was kind of a whale themed game to bring on Bogus Cheesecake, Tom Verderberg, and he had done a project called Bolarius, which is about sky whales and sky whaling. It was a D&D 5e project. Very fascinating, beautiful book. And when I brought him on and we started talking about having that whale game kind of crossover that we were doing here, we had discussed some other themes that we had in common, and we talked about religion a little bit, and kind of got to a conversation that led to like, okay, well, what if we were whales in hell, like hell whales? And then I kind of drew on a lot of my own religious experiences, kind of as a queer person moving away from the church. I have a kind of interesting history with religion. I grew up very religious and have since not become religious, whereas Tom grew up Catholic. I grew up Mormon. So we had these two very different but iconic experiences with religion. And we had a lot to draw on in that space as well. And the game kind of iterated a few times between more nautical and more religious and like different theming and stuff, but it kind of found its own way when we started just going for it. And the project kind of evolved organically over time. But yeah, it's become what it is, and it's pretty cool as it is.
Yeah, that covers. I was going to ask later why Christian nautical horror kind of, or the blend of nautical horror with Christian religious horror as well. But yeah, it seems like, just being able to draw on your own personal experience and kind of extrapolating that out into the narrative makes a lot of sense.
Right. And the original the original Moby Dick is so religious, it makes sense. Like,
yeah,
it's such
it is
a deeply Christian novel at the end of the day, in a weird way.
Yeah, although as like, and Vex is asking, like, what if we're whalers in hell and we kissed? JK, unless, and I think that's also, this is a major theme in Moby Dick studies, is like how queer the book is.
Right.
And how, to some degree, even though Melville himself didn't come out or something, when you're on long ship journeys where it was all guys, basically in the 19th century. And so even if they put into port and they would, in theory be, basically hiring sex workers, whatever gender, it's like, in theory, a lot of them had queer, romances. And there are moments in the book that are not explicit, they're not sexual, but they're very, like...
That book is homoerotic as hell.
It's homoerotic, yeah. And so it's interesting to think about. Like, it's kind of religious, but actually for its day, it's pretty cool. Like, I don't know, it's kind of a book about, like, what if...
There's a lot of layers.
People from different races were all hanging out together and treated each other equally. Or, like, a person of color could be your boss, and you had to respect him. Like, it was a very different kind of book from, I think, a lot of other, 19th century workaday literature. So
definitely for the time, like, the high seas were their own place from what, as I understand historically. Like, the laws were very different, and everything culturally was a little different. So, yeah.
I mean, people are constantly saying that whaling is the penultimate homosocial activity that you can get up to, frankly. I mean, probably sailing in general, but whaling, I think it tops it.
So that comes back to, like, religion, and I think that is an interesting question of, like, so it's cool how you kind of put it together. You had, like, mechanics you wanted to explore. It sounds like you had a sort of theme about religion and exploring, like, ideas of your own experience with faith through a game in a way that's fun for other people with these mechanics. And then you threw in, like, whales and nautical adventure. So it's sort of like three different design directions, but in a way, and I remember when we talked to Graham Gens, it's like this, it's like, you can pick three arbitrary things and then make a game out of it. Okay, that's the game.
Yeah.
Okay, it's whales, religion, and gambling. Cool, make a game. So I'm curious to hear, I guess, from your process, was this then a matter of, did you do a lot of play testing? Did you write out sort of what you wanted in terms of, like, the playbooks and your imagined loops? Like, how did the rest of the process go? Because you at this point had multiple collaborators, etc.
Right. So a lot of it came pretty close to the first few iterations. There was some early play tests where I was testing out, like, more supernatural abilities for the whalers, because, like, you're in hell and there was, like, multi-token shoot fireball type shit, but which would have been metal, but a different game, I think. And I really wanted to tighten up a lot of the mechanics I was working on with the playbooks, and those kind of arose from some of my reflection of, like, these were various aspects of how I felt about my religious experience, especially turning away from the church. And there's 6 core playbooks in the main book, and then 2 in the expansion, that they're all kind of various reflections, and a lot of my work, specifically in HELLWHALERS, was done most directly on the playbooks. But a lot of that game design came pretty close to the original ideas. It just kind of, like, flowed out of how I felt about those things, and structuring the weak and strong moves in the very true sense of, like, of how to recognize a journey through religious trauma, because essentially that's what it is. And building the playbook so they have kind of a natural arc of, like, this is what it means to do something that is more, relapse centered in those kind of recovery from trauma spaces. And then this is what it looks like to kind of rise above that trauma, and, like, moving forward with a lot of that stuff was really personal to me. But, a lot of those playbooks came from very personal places, but the game design was kind of marrying that personal experience to what I know in games.
Do you think those are aspects of yourselves, or those, like, types of people, not all you, but, like, not to be too personal, I mean, I'm just curious, mentioning these are, like, very, deep kind of philosophical things.
Right. At this stage of my life, I have kind of, like, a weird Taoist perspective of, like, I am everyone is me kind of thing. But, like, when I think of these aspects, it's very, like, if they are not directly me, they are a part of me that I can understand enough to write. So while they may not be directly me as a personal reflection of me, they're aspects that I understand enough in my own, concept of self and concept of humanity that I feel comfortable writing them.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can see the reflection of your own experience, but it doesn't have to be. It's not about you as a person.
Right.
It's a type of whaler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, Vex in the chat rightfully points out that building arcs into playbooks is hard, or maybe harder than you would expect. And that kind of, for me, it makes me wonder, like, what was your process like writing these kind of specific arcs or narrative loops into the playbooks? Like, how did you approach doing that from a mechanical perspective?
A lot of it just came down to like token economy and kind of where I expected it to go, because it's the basic structure of the token-based games. Is like you're going to have your struggle in the beginning to collect those souls, and you're going to have to eke through a lot of like vulnerability and fumbling of your character to really get to those moments of spotlight. But I really wanted to highlight that like those vulnerabilities are authentic to the character, and they may be like reflections of the trauma that brought them there. But there's a certain level of like anti-hero to most of the characters in HELLWHALERS. So while those characters are going through some shit, a lot of times, especially in a lot of the APs that have been done about it, that have been really fantastic, like you'll see these characters that like really bring up the question of like, who deserves hell? And like, is it possible to be a one-dimensionally good person? And is it possible to be redeemed if you're maybe a person that's considered bad? But a lot of these kind of characters that have arisen through the playing of HELLWHALERS, both in my own like home games and playtests and in the APs that I've seen, have come back to like some pretty flawed characters, but I think that's kind of par for the course for what we're dealing with. It's kind of a horror game to begin with, so we really want anti-heroes as it is. Yeah,
it makes me think of a show that my wife and I have been watching that's really good called The Head, that's about scientists in Antarctica, each of whom has like they're like trapped together and they have like flaws, right? And then there's a murder and all this stuff happens, but it's really just like no one is really likable. No one's like a hero. It's much more like everyone has to get along and survive. And I just think of that the trappedness aspect of being on a ship, like even a normal ship, not in hell, you're kind of trapped. And the further out you go, with whaling especially, as Chris is saying, it's kind of the ultimate. You're at that time you're like big oil or whatever. You're too big to fail. You're out in the middle of nowhere. It's dangerous. And it's like if oil could slap your boat in half, So it's really interesting how there's this like fighting with the earth to like do the bad thing to get the energy, And it's really interesting to think about that you could take you could almost like do an improv version without the playbooks. I'm not saying people should do this. The playbooks are great, but where you don't know people's flaws, and you just go in as kind of neutral sailors and then discover that everyone has, I murdered a guy back in Dublin or whatever, whatever it is. And that sort of comes out and bubbles to the surface. And it makes me think, Chris, a little of the crimes in Danse Macabre, where, the crime doesn't matter, but also players really latch onto that. And you can see them get really into it. And they're like, no, I killed a guy. And then they're thinking like, I killed that guy. And it weighs on them. And like, you even tell them like, it doesn't mean you actually did it. It's just the church is convicted, the church thinks you did it. But
yeah, we leave it up to the player to figure that part out and to like make that into the narrative. But no, we've had players who are like, oh my God, I'm a heretic. Oh, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think there's something fun about as this question of not only what makes a good arc for a playbook or how to mechanicalize that, but how to incentivize, again, using some of the constraints of you're playing a game, there's a gambling mechanic, you're in a specific scenario, but have people fill that in themselves. And I think one of the things I like about HELLWHALERS is pretty judiciously moves toward an ending, a group of possible endings depending on what you did. That you kind of can win or lose the game. It's also something that comes up interestingly on this podcast, which is winnable RPG.
Can you win a TTRPG? Yeah.
And I feel like, so Moss, I mean, this is as a question, like, how did you think about that, the whole ending bit? And like, what does it mean as a whaler to like win and get out of hell? And how much is this like literally like, yep, you have to, like Dante, like geophysically like crawl up Satan's ass crack, get escape? Or how much of it is like about growth? Is that something, I don't know, like if you have thoughts on that, again, with the actual plays you've seen, the games you've run.
Right. So I was thinking about the fact that, it was a winnable TTRPG. When I was designing it, I was like, okay, so there's a boss fight, but I want there to be stakes, because like obviously there's one sense of like this is your goal. You're here for the whale, right? So there's a big boss fight. I wanted it to be not just like, oh, you kill the boss and you win. I wanted there to be a sense of like, oh, this is important and we might fuck it up. So having that sense of like a real conflict in the end kind of pushed us towards doing the epilogues and having the sense of like what happens when you do win, right? Because you can win this game. And that kind of brought us to the epilogues, and a lot of what the thesis of HELLWHALERS is about, and I kind of talk about this in some of the epilogue stuff in the book, but like a lot of it is really about the journey, not the destination, because it is a horror game and you're going to get some kind of bleak and dark endings in it. A lot of those endings are like narratively, they're kind of a middle finger to the characters at the end of the day, but there's a large number of I think there's a large amount of resonance, I think, with like the thesis going in, that people are like, okay, I'm here for that journey with my comrades through this ship, doing things with them. And then when they when there's an inevitable ending to that, it's not as important as the actual journey that got them there, you know?
Yeah. And I like, you know, mechanically having the epilogue as this kind of moment of like tying things together and kind of trying to figure out where you're going. But it also kind of mechanicalizes having a point of reflection on the journey itself, right? Like, how has the character changed and how do they move forward from this point, winning or losing, right? Eating the whale flesh or not. It gives you a chance to like really reflect on the full length of the experience, which I think is really beautiful. Well, Moss, you know, speaking of epilogues, speaking of finishing things, what I mean, I guess, you know, Book of the Leviathan, it's not really an epilogue for HELLWHALERS, but kind of the next step. What can you tell us about that project and how it kind of expands on the original like novum of HELLWHALERS?
So Book of Leviathan is just kind of like, we had talked about, like we had almost been surprised by what HELLWHALERS did and what people had done with it, honestly. Seeing the APs that people had produced and seeing all the content in home games from like stories from people running it and like all that stuff really brought excitement back to us, as we were kind of like, we had finished this game and it was great and we loved it. But seeing what other people really took with it and kind of what they did when they ran with it was really inspiring to us. And the idea of like doing more in the HELLWHALERS world seemed like something that we could potentially, you know, give a shot at. And we had more to say, so there was, you know, a lot of the new stuff was stuff that we were like a little not sure of whether we wanted to include in the core book originally. So it was a lot of cutting room floor kind of material that ended up in the Book of Leviathan. This Book of Leviathan has my most direct commentary on my queerness and its relationship to the church, with the Abomination playbook. Some of the endings really talk about some of my thoughts for like how cool, like ecologically speaking, the whaling and like not whaling itself, but like the idea of a whale as like a megafauna and like whale fall and all that stuff was really fascinating. But like the kind of ecological wonder that I had about the ocean and all sorts of things that inspired me to make it a nautical game to begin with. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of just more to say about the original stuff. And I think a lot of that came back to like being excited about a project that, like, you know, we weren't ready to say goodbye to it yet. So here we are.
How long did you have off between HELLWHALERS and Book of Leviathan? Like, was that, you know, you took time off, or was it just been like brewing, adding?
We took about 6 months off to just kind of like sit with what had happened and like just kind of return to our lives without grinding out a project and like timelines and stuff. So we took about 6 months. I had another project with Killing Time release in the meantime. And then we kind of like discussed like, hey, what if we did do an expansion? And we kind of put it together in a relatively quick timeline. A lot of thanks to Tony over at Plus One EXP for kind of like pushing us to finish it. But that whole process of like getting it started, getting it written, getting it completed, getting it through the crowdfund was like a pretty quick, smooth thing. And I had so much fun like working with all the artists and bringing everyone back from the original team, getting to know all the like the new collaborators that we had with it. It was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you foresee like HELLWHALERS being a kind of product line where even if it's, not on any schedule, but just like when you have more stuff, you can kind of revisit and add to this world? Or do you feel like, I mean, not that you can necessarily say right now, but the Book of Leviathan was it? People, should get both, HELLWHALERS, Book of Leviathan, all the deluxe stuff, and like that is HELLWHALERS, or is that, you know what I mean? Like, do you have a sense of like the arc for this particular game world?
I think there's a little bit more I want to explore in HELLWHALERS, but I don't want to drag it out so far that we're, kind of beating a dead horse about it. I'd rather see it close with dignity than let it go on forever. I do have plans for probably a pair of like connected zines in the next couple of years, I'm guessing. So 2 more zines, but they'll release as a duo, I'm guessing. We had talked about doing a Into the Ninth Circle as like an Arctic ice themed expansion.
Very cool. Yeah.
And then
that would be fun.
A Sacrament of Oil would be our like oil themed expansion, exploring lots of themes of like Middle Eastern oil wars, olive oil as a sacrament, all sorts of things with whale oil, Christofascism and like the need for oil and the war machine, all sorts of things you can really tie on with oil. But we have a lot to say still that kind of can fit within the HELLWHALERS world, and I'm excited to get those 2 zines out, but I don't want to drag out HELLWHALERS forever.
Yeah, taking more of like the UK television approach, right? Where it's like you get a couple of really good short seasons and then you let it lay, right? As opposed to the American television approach. Although that's changing a bit. I did want to ask, is there a place for ambergris or ambergris, maybe I'm saying it incorrectly, in HELLWHALERS? Also saying that incorrectly tonight.
We did have a small reference to ambergris in our first book. There was just a one-off item you could fish up that was a piece of demonic ambergris. There's a lot of really weird things that happen in whaling and with whales, so there's a lot to touch on, but HELLWHALERS is layered with tons of references. It's a pretty well-researched TTRPG. If you read through almost any given passage, that's probably a reference to something.
That's awesome. I was going to ask, what are some of the things, after the initial book comes out and you're seeing people playing it, you're seeing wonderful AP being made, you have your own home games. What are some of the things that surprised you on people's individual treatment of it that you then brought into Book of the Leviathan? I'd
say I was kind of surprised at how not shy people were about like the themes. I wasn't sure how well received like a fairly vulnerable like subject matter would be if I was putting it out in the world. Like religious trauma obviously is it's a personal matter to me, but like putting it into my art was kind of vulnerable, and seeing other people resonate so well with that and like really grasp onto those themes and not flinch at them was really powerful. And it kind of emboldened me to put a little bit more into Book of Leviathan in terms of like what we were doing, what I was trying to say with it. And a lot of the material that ended up in that was just a little more like forward with some of that stuff, as well as with the horror, because I was really leaning in more into the horror in this one than I was with the first one. I was really enjoying some horrific things I added to the Book of Leviathan, so kind of a horror freak sometimes, and I love it.
Hell yeah. Can I ask you, is there any specific like literature or media that you were looking at when you were kind of, coming up with the horror elements for HELLWHALERS?
I can't say I can point to a specific horror like space, other than we did throw a little tribute to Junji Ito into the book, which was kind of cool. One of the lore stories, because as you play, you can collect lore that is like 6 segmented stories that kind of tell side stories in Hell. One of those lore stories is like a direct parallel to Slug Girl 2, I believe it is, The Thing That Drifted Ashore, which is a Junji Ito manga piece of Slug Girl that was really cool and inspiring as like a nautical horror kind of space. And we had our artist do an accompanying visual piece to it, and it's absolutely stunning. It looks amazing. She put a lot of hours into it too.
That's awesome. Yeah, Junji Ito's awesome. We're very much fans of different takes on horror. I feel like, Chris, and it comes up a lot on the show, like different subgenres.
Yeah, for sure.
And how different people's personal obsessions or fears. Like I remember when we were talking to Adam Voss about the horror of home robbery, like realistic, like someone enters your home.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's very different, and it is more frightening, I think, to an adult than a lot of kinds of fantasy horror, but fantasy horror lets you, of course, explore other themes. So like in our games, we often explore mutation and bodies being otherwise.
Yes.
And Moss, I love that what you're saying, like with Book of Leviathan, you're pushing yourself to be more forward about some of the passions, the themes driving you, the things you're grappling with. Because that's definitely been my experience of trying to make political games, is like, it's almost easier to pull punches and stuff and say, well, no one's going to like that or no one's going to care. But that often is what makes other people check out a game and really vibe with it, is feeling like, oh, I see myself in there. I see some struggle I've had reflected. I see something I'm pissed off about in there. So I appreciate that. That's like over time, you're trying to put that more and more into the game. And yeah, it's always fun to just be like, what's some weird shit I can think of that's really horrific and get a friend to draw. So that's one of the most fun parts of game design, I would say. So HELLWHALERS is still going on. As you say, you have these, I definitely love the idea of the Arctic supplement, the Sacrament of Oil, as to, other follow-up zines that you might have in the works. What else do you have going on? I feel like you must have some other game ideas or games coming out.
Yeah. I'm pretty much always churning through backlog projects. I just posted on my Patreon like a list of what's going on in my backlog, but right now I'm working with Alex Reinhardt, creator of Cyber Rats. We're doing a project called Needle Stitch. It is gothic puppet fantasy. So you play as like puppets that have been abandoned by their creators in like a spooky gothic fantasy world. And you're looking for basically either signs of your creators or some sort of sense of why you're here. It's kind of very introspective. Gothic fantasy is the best way to describe it, but it's kind of about what is the meaning of life, what is my purpose as a being, kind of stuff. But from the eyes of a puppet, and it's kind of taking that inspiration from like the constructs of like Frankenstein as a construct of like what that means to be created and all that stuff. A lot of like Dark Crystal, Jim Henson type like puppetry, as well as like a big inspiration for the fantasy. And then like media like Little Nightmares was a great game that was like very like you feel like a small little thing in a big horrible world. So taking a lot of that stuff, as well as the movie 9, which came out a while back, where you got little dudes who are traveling through a horrible, gloomy world.
Little burlap sack dudes, if I'm remembering that movie correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, so all those are kind of inspiration for Needle Stitch, which we're working on. It's kind of PBTA right now, but there's some twists, as I often like to have. And then otherwise, I've got plans for a second edition of Trash Dramatica, hopefully this year. We'll see. I have some stuff that I've written for it, polishing up Infinite Reverie, and then I'm working on a queer horror game right now that is like, I don't know if you are familiar with the anime right now that's just coming out, but it's The Summer Hikaru Died.
Yes. I just, in our Discord, I just highly recommended it for Queer Boys Love Body Horror Summer, which is what I've decided that my summer is.
Yes, I'm writing a game pretty heavily inspired by it at the moment, and it's been my current brainworm for project work. It's about horror of young adults that are discovering themselves in a brutal heat wave in a rural town that is haunted by like horrible body horrors and ghosts and stuff. So
it's pretty sick for those listening who haven't seen it. I'm wondering, Moss, too, do you know the author Justin Burnett? He's out of Texas. He's got a great book called The Puppet King and Other Atonements that I just feel like you would vibe with. Like, he gets really into like the puppets and mannequins and like, questioning bodily autonomy, and it's good stuff. It's good stuff. I feel like you would jive with it.
Yeah, that probably sounds like something right up my alley.
Yeah, so all kinds of different stuff, and I feel like there's a theme and a through line about kind of exploring place and exploring self through these horrific scenarios that are maybe lightly fantastic, but yeah, not doesn't sound like you're doing a lot with the high fantasy. You know, it's another world where elves and stuff. It's kind of moored in something tied to Earth and tied to the experience of being more like the player, right? The avatar is a version of the player in some way, which I think is cool. Not to knock, you know, whatever anybody else is doing. I am looking forward to Trash Nautica. That sounds a little further afield, but playing, you know, a Trash Panda in space, etc. Is something that I'd like to see what else. Where'd you go with it? And especially seeing how HELLWHALERS, because I feel like there is a kind of missing middle sometimes with games that are zines where it's a little hard to imagine what it would look like as a bigger book. And then there are bigger books, which are just like almost a different genre. And, you know, with a lot of sort of lore and just tons of other sort of things packed in there. But I like HELLWHALERS because it's a really fun product in part. You know, it's really well designed, the level of like what it is as a book. So I'm curious if Trash Nautica will grow to sort of that, I mean, maybe different scale or shape or whatever, right? But like, have a bunch of different components, basically. Which, I don't know if you want to say anything about any of these spoilers. You also don't have to, but if you want to do any light reveals or things that you want people to get excited about, feel free.
I did want to loop back real quick. You just mentioned just a second ago that like a lot of the stuff I was doing sounded like it was grounded in like a level of like horror, but also introspection. And I think that's something I want to like highlight as something that, that's spot on. A lot of my games do come from an introspective position of like feeling like the world is kind of an abjectly horrifying place when I think about it too abstractly. But I just wanted to highlight that you really nailed the thesis of my game design with that little phrase right there.
Well, that's what we're here. That's why we're having the conversation. Yeah, so just mirror, you know, what you're telling us and what we see when we're reading through your games. And hopefully, you know, as always, it's like, man, there's not enough time to play all of these games. You know,
right?
So now I want to try. Like, I want to play all of it. But I do think sometimes, Chris, we need to do like suites of like pick some very specific things and put them in conversation, or play something back to back, or play something in the style of something else. You know, just kind of like remix some of the stuff that we keep like writing down. Oh, this sounds rad. So yeah, no, I think that's a great way to think about game design too. Is that fantasy broadly, speculative work doesn't have to be very divorced from real life. But it also doesn't have to be like I'm writing about myself. It can be drawing on an experience, something someone is passionate about or working through. But then games do create a kind of safe place to, you know, almost like sandbox that, like put it in a outside of yourself, and then add other elements. You know, get weird with it, whether that's horror or something else, right? So I think that's something that for me is one of the appeals of game design, and why, at least for me, I like sometimes having like a bridge back to real life. So the game isn't just totally made up. It's like, yeah, I don't know, it's actually the year 1390 or 1700. But, you know, okay, there's some fantastic elements. Right. So it's sort of forcing you to like put your hat on and be like, I don't know, what would I do? So anyway, this is getting away from your work, Moss. What else? I guess, Chris, do you have other questions from us that we've not covered beyond just the future writ large?
No, I think my one of my final questions was one you already asked, which is what's coming up next for you, Moss, and for Brewist. But no, I mean, it sounds like, yeah, a lot of really exciting projects on the horizon. And yeah, I'm also looking forward to Trash Nautica 2.0, or however it's going to be presented to us. And
and maybe I don't know if, again, you can say this, but how have you found, I guess, being like this is a question that comes up sometimes. I feel like you have yourself as a game designer, and then Brewist as like an organization. Is that basically just you know, as like a doing business as? And then I noticed with HELLWHALERS you're working with +1 XP, whom I really like. Like, I think they're great. So I was just curious about your experience of these different levels of like. And you just sound like you have a lot of collaborators. So I guess one question, just looking broadly, I have like all of these tabs open, looking at your games. I'm like, yeah, how has it been to kind of publish things yourself and work with others? And if you have any reflections on that, and, you know, maybe looking ahead as well.
Yeah. So Brewist as an organization, legally speaking, is just me. But I do work with some regulars, including who I regard as my business partner, even if it's not necessarily on paper. Is my artistic director, Kay. Kay is a fantastic like co-collaborator for all these projects. I've been the consistent through line in making everything I do visually look beautiful. So a lot of my games are very visually driven, and a lot of that comes from Kay's work of like font selection, layout, artistic curation, all that stuff. Kay has been a fantastic individual to work with, good friend. We know each other through LARP, so we're longtime friends before working together. But she and I have been doing games since the pandemic started, and it's been a long-standing work relationship and a long-standing personal relationship that I'm very happy with. Otherwise, we have a few like regular, like rotating cast members that kind of appear in a lot of our work, but aren't necessarily directly a part of Brewist. We work with a few artists on a few different projects, and I'll oftentimes bring in like a new artist per project and then kind of work with the other artists that we regularly work with. But we have like a consistent editor, and then I'm kind of working with Plus One EXP has been, for the HELLWHALERS project, fantastic. That's been like a wonderful collaboration, and like Tony's been such a huge support. The whole team has been a huge supportive bundle of great joy to work with, and I have had the time of my life working with them. So they're very good at what they do, and having the extra like, accountability helps on my end, honestly. Someone that can kind of wrangle in my freeform artistic nature and get that to hit a deadline is a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah, I can identify with that. Yeah, we're both like, oh yeah. Luckily, we're accountable to each other.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Well, cool. Well, yeah. Well, I'm glad, Moss, that you found these creators. We also, I'm very biased to people named Gay because that's my wife's name is Gay. She says it K often in you know, like at parties. It's easy to sort of spell. But yeah, it's great that you find artists you want to work with again and again. That's how our collaboration started. Not just with Chris on the pod, but the other artists we work with here in New York. We basically just met folks, and Tony, who's not in New York, but people we liked, and just kind of kept wanting to find excuses to work together. So I feel like you know, that is one organic way to try to build games that are a little bit beyond what any individual can do, especially if you're not using AI and not rich. Basically, if you're rich using AI, whatever. But you know, that's a
different arc.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing so much of your practice and your time. I mean, as a last sort of substantive question, I was just going to ask Moss if you had any things that you've been reading or playing outside of your own work in the RPG space or board games or whatever that have kind of inspired you, innovations, things you're seeing. I don't know, just anything cool that you wanted to kind of shout out that you'd recommend.
Let's see. I've been going back and reading some of Vincent Baker's blogs, but that's all stuff that's kind of old for the general timeline of things. As far as newer stuff, I'm always keeping an eye on what Caesar Kapakal, a creator, has been doing. He's always coming up with interesting, cool mechanics that I think are really fun and kind of bespoke. He's a creator that's done a few projects that I'm a big fan of. Scrap, Into the Wind, a few others. But Caesar Kapakal always has interesting designs that I'm looking out for. As far as other games, I'm doing my homework on some queer horror stuff and was looking around for some of that. So if anyone has any recommendations, they can drop me some, but I've been looking at those separately. I'd love to see more together. Right now I'm looking in mechanically at intimacy mechanics from Sapphic World, which Dark Demon Eclipse does. Kind of looking in general at some other mechanics and vibes from Richard Wayne, our Rook Studios. Just been kind of looking around, checking out things, you know.
Love it. Digging in the crates, doing the research.
I love Richard's work.
I know. I love Richard. We got to have Richard on the pod too. We got to have Richard Antonio.
I know.
But I also love the intentionality there, you know, looking through games for specific mechanics and how others have treated, you know, simulating different narrative situations. And I think that's one of the great things of the zine era. And the more you get to know folks is you can kind of just, you could ask them directly or look through, you know, you're aware of more. So that's been fun to be sort of part of the efflorescence of just like different kinds of games beyond roll a d20, try to get a high number. Well, with that, Moss, thanks a lot for coming on. Anything else you want to discuss, or any sort of tips you would offer folks who are listening who enjoyed HELLWHALERS or any of your other work before we ask where we can find you and say goodnight?
As far as like tips for anyone that's like wanting to be in the game design space and wants to be inspired by some of the stuff I do, just like I would go back to some advice that I read. Is like try to go back to source materials instead of derivative arts as your inspiration. Kind of remember what inspired you. Kind of trace the tree up and see what that comes from. Like,
it's a fun way to put it.
Yeah, because a lot of times we get art that is inspired by art that is inspired by art that is inspired by, and that can kind of lead to a weird space, I think, in terms of like the lineage of art. So don't forget to go outside and look at a tree or whatever and write about the tree instead of books about trees.
Touch grass.
Right. Yeah. Stuff like that. But yeah, don't forget that there's a whole wide world out there full of inspiration for you, and it doesn't all have to come from other like artists and theory and stuff.
Well, Moss, our traditional last question, as always, for those who listen, where can we find you? Where can we find HELLWHALERS, Book of Leviathan, all of your other myriad games? How can we best support you? What are your pluggables, as they say?
Right. So right now we're still on Brewist Tabletop Games.itch.io. For most of our games, you can find the HELLWHALERS books in physicals and digitals, and you'll soon see Book of Leviathan at +1 EXP, their website. We are also on a website that is kind of technically finished, but also not really finished. It's kind of like live, but we're still working on it. But it's BrewistTabletop.Games is our website. You can buy our stuff through there, or like just check out what we're doing. I'm always on Blue Sky at Mossdagger, MOSSDAGGAR, and that's probably most of where you'll find me. I have a Patreon that I'm like updating more regularly now. That's about it.
Very good. Yeah, and we'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes as well. So it's just a click away.
Yeah, and I wanted to say a quick thank you to both of you for having me on. It's been a wonderful chat here.
Oh yeah. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for making time. And yeah, we'd love to have you back on. And in the future, maybe we can do something we've done in the past that I think Chris is really fun is play at least a couple of scenes. Sorry, I'm distracted by the chat, which suddenly is getting weird, getting spammy. But
Thanks,
do
Joe.
a couple scenes from a game. And then sort of unpack it with the creator. And so I think maybe in the future, Moss, if you're working on something you're excited about, something like you said, this kind of innovative game you're worried is too crunchy and fun, then I definitely think we'd love to play that. We'd love to take you up on that implied challenge and some cards. Maybe it wasn't at all spam, so I apologize to Speak with Animals. If you're into us, thank you, Speak with Animals, for hanging out.
That's friend of the pod, Joe.
Hey, Joe. Sorry, I was distracted by the beautiful snail emoji, which I don't, or whatever that is. It looks like a snail to me. Everything does. So on a podcast, listener, enjoy that I'm looking at an emoji that's probably not a snail and misinterpreted as a snail. Moss, thank you so much for joining us. Moss Powers, creator along with others, but sounds like principally your idea of HELLWHALERS and many cool games at Brewist. And we hope everyone checks out not only HELLWHALERS if you haven't, but if you already have, then Book of Leviathan and whatever Moss gets up to next. And for now, we're signing off. Thanks, Vex, for pointing out it's a speaker eyeball mode.
Yes.
Bye, y'all. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thanks for listening to Why We Roll.
Our theme music is by the brilliant Sam Tyndall and Arpline.
If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You can find us on all social media at Stillfleet. You can find out more about Danse Macabre, Stillfleet, and all of our games over at stillfleet.com.
Hey there, I'm Hugh from Moderation. If you liked today's episode, why not check out the next session? your D&D agony aunts there to answer all of your questions. Join Adam and Alyssa as they answer questions sent in by listeners like you about how to solve the problems that come with running and playing in all sorts of different tabletop scenarios. Available wherever you get your podcasts.